everyone, welcome to Wrestling Royalty. Of course, it is Friday night, which means I'm joined by Sam, my ever faithful assistant, who is, I might as well just call you part of Wrestling Royalty now. You are Wrestling Royalty.
Yeah.
And tonight we are going to be having a chat about Brock Lesnar and where his kind of status is in terms of, is he one of the best? Is he the best ever? We'll be going into a lot of chat about where we think he kind of stacks up in terms of wrestling history. So I hope you are ready. I hope you're going to comment. I hope you're going to join along. We want to hear what you think about Brock Lesnar, especially in light of his last match against Cody Rhodes at SummerSlam. So get ready. Let's talk about everything about Brock Edward Lesnar. I'm not sure you'd appreciate if I dropped his middle name in there because it's not Edward. A very hard name, is it, Edward?
It's no, I was thinking that myself. But I mean, we've had some pretty badass Edwards throughout history. I'm a big student of history. So Edward the Confessor, Edward the First, Edward the Third. These were badasses, all called Edward. And I'll tell you what name Edward is better than: Wesley. That's what I will. Just before we get on to that, if that ever crops up again, because it's our go-to. But yeah, Ed, I know what you mean. Ed, you don't think of here comes Edward. He's going to F me up. But that's one Edward who could. That's for sure.
But you do think here comes Brock Lesnar. He's going to F me up, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight. Sam giving us a little bit of a history lesson to kick things off. Always very welcome on Wrestling Royalty. We are cultured, and of course, when royalty's in your name, you've got to talk a little bit about royalty and history. So thank you very much for that, Sam. How are you doing, man? Anyway, how's it going?
I'm all right. I'm quite excited. I've got a few days off work. Everything's lovely and smooth there, so that's cool. I'm going up to my beloved Lake District this weekend for a few days, so that's going to be nice.
The weather's turned as well.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a bit rainy, but I don't care because, again, I will be taking the dogs to some places around the lakes and that. But we're also going to got a lovely hotel booked, and we're just going to eat a lot of steak and drink a lot of beer. So the rain isn't going to get me down, even if it does, because I've got everything I need.
Well, that's what you can ask for. But yeah, it's for anyone who's not in the UK at the moment, we finally, I know you've heard us the last few weeks, probably moan a little bit about the weather. We finally got a bit of weather. You can see I've got a little bit of colour. I got sunburnt yesterday playing football quite badly, so I've got a little bit of colour going on. So yeah, always nice. The world seems a happier place when the sun's out, and and everyone's a bit more chilled out. And the football season's back. So if you are watching us, thank you very much for joining us while there is the first Premier League game going on. I know for some people it'll be hard to drag themselves away. There are people in the world who do follow football and wrestling. Sam's not one of them. I am. And you've seen a couple of people who sit on either side of the fence. So anyway, thank you very much for joining us on this Friday evening or Friday or Saturday morning. If you're across in Australia, I'm sure that's what time it is there. Or if it's America, happy Friday evening. I'm sure you're about to start getting ready for a lovely Friday night anyway. As I mentioned at the top of the show, and as you can see in the title, we are talking about Brock Lesnar today. So let's pop a picture of Brock Lesnar up. And this was taken from SummerSlam, which was on last weekend. So before we go any further, Sam, very, very briefly, overall thoughts on what you thought of SummerSlam.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it was a good show. There's a few booking decisions I scratched my head at. I'm not going to lie. Just briefly, and anyone who tunes in to give me a haul here tonight for SmackDown will hear me go into more detail. I'm not a massive fan of the Jimmy Uso thing. I can be talked around, I'm sure, and I'm sure the proof of the pudding will be in the eating, so that's okay. But I smell a rat with that, which is a shame. I feel like they've sold out a little bit. But then again, wrestling is we want to see everybody kind of wrestle each other and see what that's like. It's the whole point of wrestling. So I get that there's money to be made in seeing Jimmy versus Jay, but from a bloodline point of view, I think that should have been done a while ago rather than now. But anyway, like Io Sky, really, really happy she's the champ, but I would have loved to have seen her cash in potentially fail and her to feud with Bayley. But I kind of think that's coming anyway, and maybe Io will feud with Bayley as a babyface champ, or Bayley's the heel. I don't know, but they're both heels, and she celebrated as a babyface winning the belt when she's still very much a heel, and it was still a bit weird. So there's a few booking decisions I thought were a bit weird. I loved, however, the Brock Lesnar Cody stuff, every inch of it. So
that's good, because we are going to talk about a little bit about it on this one. It's not going to. I don't think tonight's going to be a particularly long video or long stream. Even though there are a lot of different things that have happened obviously in Brock Lesnar's career, we're going to try and condense it down and really focus in around Brock Lesnar's standing in the sense of where he kind of stands in the history of wrestling, and amongst some of the ones that you would probably say are the best ever to have laced their pair of boots up to get in a wrestling ring. I agree, by the way. I thought the Brock Lesnar Cody match, I wasn't sure at the beginning, but as it went on, I was like, oh, I see what you're doing, and you're really kind of building the character of Cody. And Brock Lesnar was a big factor in that as well. And it's probably a side of him that we've started seeing a little bit more over the past year or so. But yeah, I thought it was great. I thought both of them came out of it really well. We talked a little bit on the last Friday when we did our preview show for SummerSlam, where we were wondering whether this would be a kind of Cody has to go over, but has to go over strong. And I thought they did that without sort of damaging Brock Lesnar's aura or kind of mystique too much either. So I thought it was very well done myself as well. So completely agree on that front. So we're going to dive into it, and we'll probably be a little bit all over the place, because with Brock Lesnar, he's been in and out of the wrestling industry. He's dabbled in a couple of other things as well, such as UFC and NFL. So excuses if we're kind of not linear in our timeline.
No.
Of course, most people of a certain age will remember Brock Lesnar came in as the next big thing, and the real like kind of, I guess, like celebration and coming out moment was his victory over The Rock at SummerSlam all those years ago. What was your first impression when you saw Brock Lesnar all the way back when you first saw him? Was that at SummerSlam? Was it before, or was it one of those ones where you kind of picked up on him a little bit later on?
So he reminded me at first of a couple of things. He reminded me first of Drago from Rocky. I thought he's kind of got that vibe going on, and I like it. You know, this indestructible monster, and he looks a bit Russian, doesn't he? He looks a little bit Eastern European, Brock. But he's always had that little vibe going on.
He looks quite like Nordic, more like Scandinavian sort of.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I know what you mean. But there is connecting tissue between those people, isn't there? The Rus and the Vikings and.
He'd swing that axe around on a battlefield if he. That's. I've heard a lot of people say that. By the way, they always think Brock Lesnar was born in the wrong era because he should have been born, as I say, as a Viking and swinging that axe around on a battlefield somewhere. But sorry, carry on. I really.
It's so true. Part of me was like, oh God, is this Heidenreich Mark II? So. At the time, I thought there was potential there, really, but anyway, but no, like bit by bit, he became like a household name, didn't he? And like, I don't know at what point it happened, but at a certain point, he became. I don't really want to say legend, because I feel like he's certainly one day going to be referred to as that. But I don't think we've ever had a guy quite like him. The pure physicality that he represents, his gimmick is that physicality. And I feel like he's tangled with almost everybody in a meaningful way. There's a couple of things I'd still like to see him do, but I like it, when people talk about Brock Lesnar retirement. I'm not ready for it. I'm really not. It'll be a sad day for me when that happens. And the man likes money too much, I think, to do it anytime soon, I reckon. So, which is good. Keep liking money, Brock. Keep entertaining me, because I think when Brock makes an effort to have a good match or a good story, he really does well. But the problem is he sometimes clearly doesn't care either. And that can get me down. There've been matches I've been furious. There's been Brock Lesnar matches in the past I've been really annoyed at. Not so much him, but more the booking as well. But then there's been times I've absolutely loved it, and I've gone back and I've watched it like 20 times. So I know I'm getting beyond the realms of initial thoughts, but like I won't go into the big ones because I'm fairly sure we'll come on to them. But I routinely watch Brock versus Balor, Brock versus AJ, Brock versus Daniel Bryan. Like, not so much the Undertaker, the Rocks, and the things like that, but I like the actual fights he's been in with a smaller guy who's tried chopping him down like a tree. And that's always been the stuff, the Brock Lesnar stuff I've really liked. And I don't even think Seth Rollins has ever had quite one like Balor, Bryan, and AJ did against him, which is a shame. And but yeah, that like, when I think of Brock at the moment, a lot of my favourite matches of recent times often involve him.
Fair enough. I mean, well, let's start there. When we kind of we'll boil it down and we'll ask the kind of ultimate question towards the end. But who is your all-time favourite like rivalry or match that Brock Lesnar has had? And feel free if there's a match that doesn't fit into the rivalry, then that's fine. But where are you kind of swaying towards when you think of that is the best match? That is the best rivalry that Brock Lesnar has ever had.
So I think the best rivalry Brock Lesnar has ever had. Now, it might be replaced by the Roman Reigns one because of how epic and important that was to the overall storytelling. But for me personally, it was the rivalry with Goldberg. And people might be surprised to hear me say that. But
the first time, or
well, all inclusive, because there was some long-term storytelling going on with that I really appreciated. Like, I'm a big mark for long-term storytelling. I appreciate it. Because I think Goldberg in recent time has been associated with things like the Bray Wyatt stuff and a few other things, and the Undertaker match that didn't quite come off. But if you think back to when Goldberg was one of the biggest things in the business and when Brock was one of the two biggest things in the business, their clash seemed inevitable. And it was very exciting. Now, sadly, we got that WrestleMania match where both of them were leaving the company and they both got mercilessly booed by the crowd. And the match suffered as a result because it didn't matter who won. There was no stakes. But I did like the story that they wove 10 years later, which was the one guy who's still in Brock's teeth. The one guy he can't get over the loss to is Goldberg. And then when Goldberg came back to the company, won the Universal Championship off Kevin Owens and had a pretty short but dominant tear. That was great, by the way. It really, really was. That was Goldberg at his best in many ways. This was a Goldberg we never formally got in WWE until this point. This is really vintage, good stuff. And that feud between him and Brock was great because Brock just needed to scratch that itch. And the fact that Brock won the title from it and that became so important almost felt second fiddle to me. It felt like, and then Brock got squashed at Survivor Series, I believe it was, and then he got embarrassed at the Royal Rumble by Goldberg. And this story was just like steam that coming out of Brock Lesnar's ears. This was brilliant, and I loved the idea that the one Titan, this other Titan, hasn't ever put down is Goldberg, and he needs to before, And so when they met at WrestleMania, they only had a short match, but it was great. There was a lot of psychology. There was a lot going on. And this is why when people slag off Goldberg, I do tell them to shut up because that was phenomenal. And I wish people would stop forgetting about it because it was really good. And to me, that is probably my favorite Brock Lesnar feud of all time. The Roman Reigns one was great, but the problem with the Roman Reigns one is they did it to death. They did it into the ground. WWE will want to remember that one as the best one ever, or the thing with the Undertaker is the best one ever, or The Rock. But I'm going with the Goldberg thing. The WWE versus WCW angle was also part of it. I just thought it was magnificent.
Yeah, I mean, the other one I would potentially throw in there is the classic rivalry with Eddie Guerrero as well. That was obviously a huge moment, that No Way Out match. But there's so many kind of moments now that he's built up that you kind of like, actually, when you go through his complete back catalogue of rivalries, of matches, and moments, like, he is probably one of the people in the wrestling industry who you could probably put his body of work up against pretty much anyone, which is kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to have this discussion, was to see like where it does stack up. I mean, even like when you go back to his first year in WWE and beating The Rock, and then he went on and he beat Undertaker, he beat Hulk Hogan, and he had like kind of rivalries with Kurt Angle. He went through a lot. He was King of the Ring.
Yeah.
You also go through some of the accolades. He's won the Royal Rumble. He's won the Undisputed title. he's won pretty much every singles apart from he never went for like the mid card because it was kind of below him for most of his career anyway, and probably still is to some degree as well.
That's one of my gripes with him. Sorry to jump in, but that's let's not forget he's won the IWGP as well in Japan. He's been the head guy in Japan too, and that was an awesome run. Like the fact that he's not jumped ship to AW, some of that sweet Tony Khan money surprises me sometimes. But yeah, I'll get on to the what I think about the mid-card titles in a bit. I'll let you carry on. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just going to say, like, even like the kind of like the smaller ones. I mentioned Hulk Hogan, that match where he beats Hulk Hogan with the belt and like kind of busts open Hulk Hogan, and then he just smears who at the time, and obviously he was still wrestling, was considered to be, when by some would probably still be considered to be the greatest of all time. He took his blood and smeared it across his chest. And
we'd love to see it, Brock. We'd love to see
it. That imagery and that he created in that match was second to none. And I guess the other thing as well is, he would be an elephant in the room. Not to mention, Paul Heyman was so key in making Brock Lesnar what he is today as well, because there's been a lot of his career. Maybe this is where some of the kind of questions start to come in about, like, in the kind of, no, he can't be considered one of the best, is his talking ability. Because he has, for the longest time, had Paul Heyman to be able to speak when it's been needed anyway. That's all right. So while you're kind of toweling down, I was going to ask...
so hot. Carry on, sorry. I'm just so goddamn hot. There we go.
Mildly attractive is what I would say.
Well, that too.
What I was going to say is, when you think of Brock Lesnar and the talking ability, is that one of the things that stops him being kind of catapulted to the very top of the list?
See, so many people, this is a really important factor for, and I get that it is. I get that if you're going to be the full package, you need to be that. But I actually don't think it's everything. I think there are some wrestlers who benefit from the quiet, from the silence. They really are. And Brock's one of them. I don't need to hear Brock quipping on the mic like The Rock and things like that. I don't need to hear it. Yes, Paul Heyman has been a massive part of his career and a really important part. Because like a prized fighter like Brock benefits from having a hype man, like a manager, an advocate, someone to do that. Like, not every wrestler benefits from it. Someone like Lashley does as well. Not just because Lashley can sometimes be a little bit weak with promos, but just because the big scary guys benefit from that the most. The smaller guys don't. If you had AJ Styles coming to the ring with a hype man, the optics just wouldn't look right. And AJ can cut a promo just fine. He's not the best, but it just wouldn't work. So, like, the fact that Brock is this silent killer, who doesn't talk, I find him more menacing when he doesn't talk and someone talks for him. I really do. I kind of liked it when Brock spoke, you didn't hear what he said because the mic wasn't near him. You just heard him going at somebody. That's my favorite Brock, silent and deadly.
That reminds me of that Simpsons episode where I think is it the Chinese mob is at the end, and Homer's like, "Oh, look at that guy's not done anything. He just stood there silently. He's going to do something really cool." And then he's got everything. But yeah, I do agree. There are people throughout history where, like, it's always the kind of bigger guy normally that benefits from having someone who can talk, because let's face it, like, that strong silent type that you're going to have, like, can, as you say, be more intimidating, because if they don't say anything and then let what they do in the ring do their talking for them, then that has much more impact than grabbing a mic and cutting a 20-minute promo, which doesn't really talk about anything anyway, and it's kind of full of normal wrestling cliches. But it's also not to say that he can't cut a promo, because we've seen in recent weeks that he definitely can. We've seen him have little kind of bits and pieces on the mic. We can see that he's been funny. Like, a lot of people remember the sort of beatbox stereo with the Money in the Bank briefcase, where he came out dancing.
I got it.
He did the whole mariachi band thing with Eddie Guerrero, and Rackers. The stuff with Kurt Angle's hilarious as well, where they're in the back trying to do, like, press ups and stuff, and impress some girls in the locker room. So he's got that aspect to him as well. So it's not that he's not without personality. It does shine through every now and again. So it's very interesting to say he spent the majority of it being an absolute killer when he has actually got some decent chops in the sense of, like, humor in that as well. The other reason...
Great. Oh, sorry, mate. Go on. Sorry.
Go on. No, go on before I move on.
No, I was going to say what's great about that as well is when he does cut these promos, like he doesn't give an F. So like it doesn't matter how his promo is delivered sometimes because he's Brock Lesnar and he's on his time and he'll say what he wants and he'll say it however he wants. And if you don't like it, what are you gonna do? I mean, like, and that image, so him coming to the ring and just being nonchalant and who cares how my promo sounds, adds to his mystique, adds to his whole aura. So, like, you know, in a way that even someone like Roman Reigns can't pull off at all, succotash. But with Brock, like that weakness then just becomes a strength, and it's just great.
So yeah, one of the other things I was going to say is that's kind of always put into the negative column against him being considered one of the top is that he has left and kind of come back on arguably 2 occasions. One very kind of obvious one was he went across to the UFC and became a champion there, and in some respects probably made UFC closer to what it is today by bringing a little bit more drama into it and kind of a bit more showbiz, I guess, than it was used to. And he also had a little bit of a time where he went and tried out for Minnesota Vikings as well, got quite far through their training camp and almost got selected. I think he got through to the final cut round to join an NFL team, which is ridiculous in the sense of how many kind of different skill sets you need to do that. So it speaks a lot about his athletic prowess. But for wrestling fans, that seems to be one bone of contention is Brock wasn't around for a few years and kind of did his own thing. Do you think that should be a negative, or do you think in actual sense that's made him a bigger star?
No, he's a human being. He can do what he wants. People might go, "Oh, it's disloyalty to the business." No, it's not. The guy pivoted and wanted to try something new. You only get one life. Guy was having a crack. No, like he doesn't owe anybody anything. Like when he's ready to hang up his boots, it's time for him to hang up his boots. It's on his terms. I've never understood that when people go away and do something else, and then the fans get angry at them. It's their life. This is their job. Like, yes, they care about the business and things like that. But if a guy needs to go and do something else and earn money another way, then that's on them. No one's got a right to even have an opinion on it, as far as I'm concerned. So I think he absolutely did the right thing, and again, absence makes the heart grow fonder. How can I miss you if you won't go away? And there you go, every time.
Yeah, I think the other thing you got to remember as well is like someone's dream might be to be the headline of a WrestleMania. Someone's dream might be to just be in WWE at all. But then for other people, their ambitions in life is to see how far they can go and how much they can push the envelope and and test themselves as an individual. So as you say, they should never be penalized for that. And if anything, I actually thought when he came back, his star was bigger than it was before he left because he'd done so much. Where was he going to go for those couple of years that he wasn't in? So I can't say I ever would hold that against him. I definitely wouldn't say it to his face either. We've had a comment from Matthew Lincoln. Thank you for joining us tonight. A little bit confused. If you want to kind of let us know a little bit more, he said, do you think it's fair that WWE allows people to cheat? Do you want to expand on that a little bit? Because I'm not too sure. What do you mean by cheating? Who's cheating? Do you mean in general in matches or
the heels? Because I mean, without the cheating, like, don't get me wrong. Like, there's heels need to be able to competently win matches without cheating every now and then. But we need the cheating dynamic for the heel face dynamic to work. So, but I know what you mean. Like, if you're watching wrestling and let's say you're not as clued in as the wrestling fans are. You're going to think, well, why do they not have VAR? VAR would kill professional wrestling overnight. So screw it. You know what I mean? Like, we need the gimmick of the cheating and the idea of when the bell rings and then when the bell rings again, that's it. Like, and I think like when certain authority figures do punish some wrestlers for cheating, but when it's like you need to suspend your disbelief with wrestling sometimes, and cheating comes into that. So like with Roman Reigns is the bad guy. So the more backstage tantrums he throws in kayfabe, the more he doesn't turn up, the more times he only defends his belt once a month or less than that. The more he does that, good. Because the more that's making fans snarl at him, the more he's doing his job as a heel. So I'm all for cheating by the heels, because without it, the baby faces have nothing to overcome. And without nothing to overcome, we don't tell a hero story. And what makes a good heel, what makes a good a good hero, a good baby face, is a good villain to overcome. And Roman Reigns is doing that nearly better than anybody right now.
Yeah, I agree with Sam. As long as it kind of calls for it in the storyline, and it can really kind of further things, because it's been enough to make you comment, and obviously it means something to you, which means they're doing their job very well.
Yeah.
So I'd say his job is to make you angry enough that you keep tuning in, and one day see him get his comeuppance,
which he'll get.
About. So it's, when does it come? And I think maybe the argument at the moment is it happening too much? Is it going on a bit too long? That's maybe some of the questions that kind of spiral off from there as well. But yeah, I know the result on Sunday, as Sam said at the top of the show, was a little bit controversial. I think WWE maybe should have stuck a bit more to the rules that they put in and been a bit more creative about the whole tribal combat thing. But I think at the moment we're all tuning in because of the cheating to see when eventually, and who, more importantly, Roman drops it to when that time comes. So it's all a vehicle to get us there, and we're all in the same car for the same ride. But thank you for commenting. If you've got any comments on, let us know what your thoughts are on Brock Lesnar, because Brock's had a few controversial matches as well, where he's not won by normal means. I vividly remember watched, I think it was a SummerSlam as well, wasn't it, where Brock versus Randy Orton, and he took his gloves off and started pounding, and it was pretty gnarly with the blood absolutely pouring out of Randy Orton's head. I believe that was SummerSlam about
2015, was it? I want to say
8 years ago, if that's true. Wow, that's some time past since then.
I mean, Jericho was still there. It was before like 2016 and 2017, I think. So must be.
Could be.
Could be 2016. Could be around. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's around that.
Yeah. So like even like in the kind of like that stage, he's had a couple of matches with John Cena, which again is probably a name you would say could be up there in terms of one of Brock's like biggest rivalries as well. But I think you brought up a point that I would like to kind of explore a little bit more, and I'd ask anyone who's watching, give us a comment as well. Would you like to see, before Brock Lesnar hangs it up, would you like to see him go for those kind of mid-card belts of the US title, the Intercontinental title, or even maybe have a tag team like campaign as well with someone like Shelton Benjamin? Let us know in the comments, but I'll start with Sam. What's your thoughts, mate? Would you like to see that?
I really would, and I'll tell you why. So right now, because Roman is still the champion, technically Roman is still the Universal Champion and the WWE Champion. Because of that, Brock cannot. There's a daddy long legs bouncing around the screen. Go away. Over there. Because of that stipulation from last year's SummerSlam, so that is now a week and a year old. He can't challenge for those two big belts. Now, those two big belts have since been unified, and there is another world championship in the company. The big gold belt is essentially back. So he could go after that, I suppose. But I've always liked the idea of Brock going after a mid-card belt, because he will elevate the belt, and it'd be the company explaining to the audience that those belts are important. If Brock was to go after one, it would suddenly catapult those belts to another status. The fact that he ignores them punks them out, makes them look like mid-card belts. So, like, one of the money matches in WWE right now is Gunther versus Brock Lesnar, and make that about who's the better man and who should hold the IC championship, and maybe do that at Mania. And sorry, you've got one hell of a match by two amazing performers, and it'll make that belt mean so much. Like, I'm just begging to see that. Like, keep that belt on Gunther until Mania. Do it. And let's see maybe Brock, take him on, or maybe see Gunther beat Brock, take it off him, and then beat Brock at Mania and get it back. Maybe for McIntyre to dethrone him, or Sheamus, or Chad, or whoever. But yeah, or even the United States Championship, send Brock after that, and make that mean something again, because that belt gets punked out even more than the IC. at this moment in time. Like the United States Championship means nothing now. Don't get me wrong. It's been Austin Theory's had a good run and it meant something for a time because Triple H was making it a big deal. But the fact that they keep leaving him off every Mania card, no, not Mania, like every pay-per-view card since Mania, it's kind of like he had that victory against John Cena and it's since fallen off a cliff. And before that, he was coming out, cutting promos. He was being a right little gobsh on the mic, doing all this. And now it's just because Gunther and Seth Rollins and Roman are all doing such a good job with the other belts, everyone's kind of forgotten about Theory. So they need to give that belt a shot in the arm, and Brock Lesnar's the way to do it. But ultimately, I think the money match is Gunther for the IC. Let's make the IC relevant. Let's make it a big deal. That is how you do it.
It would be a very tasty match. That, and I think most people would want to see that. And if it is going to happen, you'd want to happen at WrestleMania as well. That's a huge one. But yeah, I love the idea of the US title kind of being one that Theory gets a bit too, big for his breeches and or big for his boots, and says, "I'll take on anyone." And Brock comes out and just absolutely destroys him,
annihilates him.
Yeah, and again, it elevates that title straight away. I think he could do absolute wonders with that title, even if it's just for a short-term fix as well, until they kind of get someone in place who they kind of want to pass the baton on to as well.
He could also say as well, he could acknowledge the stip. He could say, "Look, I can't challenge Roman. I can't wait for Cody to kick Roman's ass or whoever else.
Yeah,
and take the belt off him. And when that happens, don't think we're done, Cody. We're not. We're done for now, but don't think it's forever. But until then, Seth, I might come after you one day, but right now I've got my eyes on this, and just make a joke out of it. Say, look, I haven't held this one for a while. I'm doing the circuit. That's who Brock used to be. He wanted all the biggest belts. But the fact that they've made the heavyweight championship kind of makes the stipulation that he can't have a world title a bit weird, a bit ropey. Like, can he actually go after Rollins if he wanted to, or can he not because it's a world? You know what I mean? It's a bit up in the air now.
Yeah, I think I always just presumed they meant as in like you couldn't have Roman any title that Roman was kind of holding. But yeah, it's not 100% clear, but that's the way I've always presumed it anyway. He did have, I don't know if it was an interview or was kind of quoted when he was asked about, when he kind of hangs it up. He doesn't want a goodbye, Brock Lesnar. He just wants to slip out quite quietly, which is, I think when you hear about Brock Lesnar, the wrestler, or the WWE superstar, he's very different to the Brock Lesnar of real life, because when you listen to other interviews about him and people kind of now have accepted, actually, he's just this kind of lumberjack guy who enjoys country music, and he enjoys a good steak, and he enjoys hunting up in the wilderness of Minnesota, and he just likes his own company and his own family's company. He doesn't need anything else. So it doesn't surprise me massively that he wants to kind of just put her off. But one thing I have noticed, and it's one thing I wanted to ask you about, is the last year or so, he's had feuds where he's let the other people. He's had the other people go over. So Roman obviously came out on top in their kind of big feud. Cody on Sunday got the third out of the it was almost like a 2 out of 3 falls, I guess, in the end sort of thing over there. Of course, of their rivalry, even to the extent where, if you go a little bit further back, that moment at the Royal Rumble where Drew McIntyre eliminated him elevated Drew McIntyre's star massively.
Yeah.
Is that the stage of Brock Lesnar's career that he's currently in, where his job is simply now to get other people over, or is there more in the tank for him to do before he goes?
Well, I think the now that they've finally given that story a full stop, there's he's done a lot of putting other people over in many ways, but he's still Brock Lesnar. Like, most people fall to him, and they should for a while, But this whole Cody Rhodes thing. Well, let's be honest. When they started at the Raw after WrestleMania, which I was at, open mouthed when they did this in LA, I don't think they knew at all what they were doing with this Brock and Cody thing. They knew they wanted Brock to wrestle Cody because it was a tantalizing program, but I don't think they had They hadn't really decided what they wanted it to be. And at SummerSlam, they gave us the reason. They gave us the whole thing, which is, again, they've not explicitly stated it, but my interpretation is Brock was furious at Cody for losing. You know, you had him and you let it slip through your fingers. You're not ready for him. I'm going to punish you. And only once you go through me properly and outfight me, can you then be the man to dethrone Roman, and then you have my blessing. That's the interpretation I got from that, and that works. It fits with the story. It fits with Brock. I hated the idea of him just being the Scorpion and the Frog, and him just doing it because he's Brock. Because it's okay, but it doesn't really achieve anything. It doesn't explain. So I'm glad that they've done this. So my point is, like, he's really. Like, he's given up a lot doing that, given up a lot of mystique, because that, if anybody was ever unsure that, by the way, that Cody was dethroning Roman, that pretty much nailed it on for me. Because Brock lost to him clean, lifted his hand up and went, this guy. That right there is them sticking an exclamation point on Cody. And Roman in character should be worried. But I do want to see Roman get a few more. I do want to see Brock get a few more wins. Like, I like the idea of him beating Gunther and then Gunther just going on a campaign of hatred towards him. But I love the idea of Gunther potentially winning that feud, though. Because I think Brock is in a very unique position where he could make a lot of stars. He really could. And let's not forget, Brock's had a lot. I actually left it up. There we go. He's had a lot. Like, he got Undertaker's streak. He got things like that. So I'm not saying he owes it, because he doesn't owe anything, but he should do his best to create some more immortals on his way out. And if he doesn't want to work with Riddle and people like that, like Roman Reigns, he's already done a lot to put over. Cody Rhodes he's put over. I think there's a couple more in him. I think Gunther's the obvious choice. I think he really is, and there's a few others. I don't want Brock just to become a loser who loses to everybody, but somebody should get his career. He should go out on a shield like the Viking warrior we've discussed he is, to whoever's going to be, dare I say, the next big thing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well, because obviously, like, the whole and I've got a picture on here actually. The Undertaker Streak, it was the next one. And he was the one who was claimed that, and it was kind of discussed, and his name was the one that eventually was decided on, that he is going to be the person to break the Undertaker Streak. And maybe it's going to be similar to when he goes out, is to say the mystique of, I'm going to take Brock Lesnar's career, and they're just waiting for the right person for that time. And I don't think it's anytime soon. I'm pretty sure, he'll make sporadic appearances for the next few years, maybe 2-3 years, and then be done. He doesn't even need to be here full time at all. I think actually recently he's probably been in a lot more than he has, in a long time. Probably because he's actually enjoying it, which seemed to change around that SummerSlam where we had a picture of him up on the tractor thing. That seemed to be the moment where I was like, this Brock Lesnar actually is just having a good time. And that
was a great spectacle, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I was there. You could probably see me. It's somewhere in the in that middle box.
So you are, yeah. I can't see you, but yeah, I remember you saying you were there.
Yeah, so I got some really cool.
That was amazing to see in person. That.
I mean, it was, until you realised you couldn't see half the match after it had happened, because it was on the other side of the ring. But it was really cool, and like walking up and seeing like the ring up to, and at the end when everyone had kind of gone home, and Brock Lesnar was just sat at the top in the middle of the ring and just smiling. So, so that was awesome. But yeah. What I was going to say is, I think there's a little bit of legs in what happened at SummerSlam by accident, as well as on purpose, is a sort of young, gobby upstart, someone like Austin Theory, someone like Grayson Waller, can kind of poke the beast a little bit and say, oh, you've gone soft, like you're raising Cody's hands. He's like, you're not who you used to be and stuff. Even to the extent where, you're a laughing stock because you split your shorts 2 minutes into a match, and everyone's seen your ass now. So it's a case of like, they can poke him and then he just absolutely destroys them, because that's who Brock Lesnar is. Like, he can just kind of pretend to laugh along and then hit a couple of F5s, a couple of German suplexes, and be done with it. And it just legitimizes him, because actually, if you're going to laugh at me, remember that I can just destroy you at a moment's notice. Don't kind of mistake my my respect for weakness, because that's not what it's been about. Cody earned it, you haven't, sort of thing. And he doesn't even need to talk. He can just laugh and then do what he wants.
Yeah.
So
F5. Yeah. Up he goes.
Exactly that. I will ask you about that WrestleMania moment. Probably one of those ones that most wrestling fans will never forget. What was your thoughts on Brock Lesnar being that person who became the one in 21-1?
See, I argue with myself about this one to this day. So there's part of me who thinks somebody like Bray Wyatt should have been coronated by the Undertaker streak, because he was almost like the heir apparent, and even WWE have gone out of their way to tell us that in recent times. I know Bray's not been on TV for a while, but let's remember the Undertaker and Bray moment a few months ago, where they were in the ring together and he whispered in his ear, because Bray got like flattened by Undertaker at Mania at one point, and that sort of killed some of his mystique as well. So I've often been of the view that it would have been good for Bray Wyatt to have had that against Taker. But then another part of me thinks it makes sense to be Brock, because who the hell else had that in him? Who the hell else? Like, from a realistically, I know wrestling's not real, but if you're booking this from who's the most logical threat, so the Undertaker's getting a little bit older, a little bit slower, who's the guy who's now at the height of their power and is looking to cement that power and their status at the top of the card? And if that's got to be Brock Lesnar, taking the Undertaker streak out, and I love the idea that it was a little bit like, well, what did you expect? This is Brock now. What do you expect? Like, do you really think this was going to go any other way? And if you did, you've not been paying attention. I liked that, just the brutality of it, just what did you expect? This, I loved that. But at the same time, I think it could have been utilized a little bit better on someone like Bray. But then again, the shock factor of it is probably what makes it so good. Because if it had been Bray, people would have been like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Well, it's only when you really think hard about the Brock Lesnar thing do you think, oh, that makes sense. Because you could argue Brock didn't need it.
Yeah.
But look what he's become since then. I don't care who's holding what belts. He's still the final boss in many ways. And that did help cement him at that point. We saw the current final boss get wiped out by that final boss. And if you're writing fiction, the way you get over a new big bad is to have them take out the previous big bad. It's classic storytelling. You could, sorry, and I'm rambling on, but you could also argue that Bray Wyatt wasn't at that point yet where he could have helped elevate him further, and maybe he'll get there one day. But we've had the Brock Lesnar era since then, and apart from some of Vince's booking, like in 2017, 2018, 2019, it's been pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I guess about this is you've got to look at the time period of like who was around, even like a couple of years before, a couple of years after, and he'd come off the back of those Shawn Michaels matches, he'd come off the back of the Triple H matches, and then go into like Brock Lesnar. And I think probably at the time more people were, and I think this is maybe what sticks with people, is they were a bit shocked it was Brock Lesnar because he'd not long been back. And people were a bit like, will he take off again? And does that mean anything? And I think now when you look in hindsight, you can probably say, actually, that was the right decision 100%. And sometimes that's where you're like, for all the transgressions and misgivings and things that Vince has done, over the course of however long, he knows when the right thing in wrestling is to do the right thing. So like he kind of like places things as he sees fit. But this is one of those decisions where you go, actually, it's kind of stood the test of time, really, because there's no guarantees that someone like Bray, we've seen what happened with him, and we wish him a speedy recovery from the illnesses that he's had and stuff like that. Would that have affected him? Would he have been out before Brock Lesnar was out, which kind of we've seen anyway? That's happened. And as you say, you then look at Brock Lesnar's career that went from here, and actually it went from strength to strength. he did become that final boss. He became the big evil, and this is kind of legitimized him in that position. So, and quite frankly, it's one of my favorite all-time moments when you go back and watch a match is the noise around that stadium when
Silence.
the referee's hand hits 3, and there's like almost like a gasp followed by a stunned silence.
Yeah,
and
it's incredible.
We don't get to see it, but there's a moment where you can see it on this picture in the background where it says 21-1, and it wasn't until they put that up on the screens that you hear one woman scream because it's that realization that, oh, that wasn't a mistake, that just happened. And for me, it's like it's the best kind of example of a balloon being popped and like just like deflated straight away. It's absolutely fantastic. And even to the extent where you had that moment on the same night where it ended with Daniel Bryan having this big moment. So WrestleMania 30 for a couple of reasons goes down as one of the all-timers. And they did such a great job, which is why I expect big things at WrestleMania 40 because of how big 30 was. So yeah, for me, that's one of Brock's like crowning achievements. Away from, it's bigger than a championship. It's bigger than a Royal Rumble win, and he's had both of them. He's had plenty of them. He's had 2 Royal Rumble wins, and this is still a bigger moment. So kudos to WWE and Brock Lesnar and everyone else involved in that particular moment. As I said at the top of the show, apologies for the kind of, this is what we used to have to deal with. It was never in shiny HD like some of the other photos.
Oh, yeah. Look at that.
It's quite grainy on the graphics, but these used to move as well, so it's not all bad. But yeah, this was, as I said earlier on, this is a coming out party, I guess, in terms of like when we were reading it and we're watching it. And I vividly remember reading the WWE magazine back in the day about the build up to this, and it got me really hyped up for SummerSlam. And that was when I guess, like for me, I kind of knew about Brock Lesnar. But again, another example of a huge, not just moment, but rivalry as well. And other than having like a beard and a top knot, his physique's not changed at all.
No, he's just big, isn't he? He's just like, there's not an ounce of fat on him. He's just big, and it's it's incredible. And I keep going on about it, but I just want to see him wrestle Gunther. I want to see them smash each other. I just want to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to wrap up in a few minutes, but I did promise, as the title says, is Brock Lesnar the GOAT? And for anyone who kind of doesn't understand that, is Brock Lesnar the greatest of all time? You might, and this can only ever be opinion, by the way. This is never going to be a fact. This is mine and Sam's opinions of whether he can or can't be. So let's start with that big question. Is Brock Lesnar the greatest of all time?
No. Because I don't think you could put a gun to my head and ask me who's the greatest of all time, and I wouldn't be able to give you an honest answer. I'd rattle off a list of people who could be. And perhaps Brock could be in there. But I don't know if he's, as Roman Reigns would say, move the needle in the way that someone like Ric Flair, I hate to say it, but Hulk Hogan, maybe The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin might have done. Even The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. But like he's in there. Like if you were to get like the top tier, a list of the top tier and throw them on the table and like, sprinkle them around, he is in there. But I can't give him the top greatest of all time spot because.
So what's the particular reason then?
Because there are people like Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock and Ric Flair who fundamentally changed the sport, changed the art form in various ways. Brock is very reliable. He's an amazing attraction, but and he is a household name to some point, but I can ask my father-in-law, do you know who The Rock is? Yes. Do you know who Stone Cold Steve Austin is? Yes. Do you know who The Undertaker is? Yes. Even those Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels doesn't know who Brock Lesnar is. I say, do you know who Brock is? No. So that right there, I don't know if he's permeated popular culture. He's certainly permeated sports and fight culture, like UFC and things like that. But I think you've got to, and he can back it up in the ring as well as anyone. Not saying he can't. I think he can actually cut a promo as well as anyone. I think his mystique is as good as the Undertaker's, if not better these days. But there's that certain factor, those generational stars like Hulk Hogan, like The Rock, like I don't think he's ever been there, but I do still think he's top tier, but I can't give him the greatest of all time because I don't even you could ask me between like Hulk Hogan, The Rock, and Stone Cold, and people, do I think any of them are the greatest of all time? And I'd be here all day debating it, and you'd not get an answer out of me. So because I can't give you one, I can't. I don't know. So I'm not even going to express an opinion. So I don't think he is the greatest of all time, but I'm happy to say I do think he's one of the greatest of all time. I think he sits maybe a little bit of a branch below some of the names that I've said, but only just.
Yeah, I mean, while you were kind of saying that, I was interested to know in terms of, because you've alluded to it a little bit there. It's not all about championships. There's this kind of like factor of, do they cross over into a mainstream star as well? And probably to some degree he does, as you say, because maybe because of the UFC side of things and because he has been featured on a lot of the kind of like marquee matches and stuff inside WWE where it does get a lot of publicity. But I was looking at the championship side of things, and if you kind of count the let's call them world titles, he's had more world titles than Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah.
He's had the same amount, which is 10, as The Rock. He's had more than Hulk Hogan had. Obviously not as long, but even then he's had some massive streaks with the belt as well. It's not exactly like he's kind of like flip-flopped any belts that he's had. So in terms of championships, there's 3 names that he's either equal or gone past in terms of championships. He's won the Royal Rumble twice. He's won the King of the Ring. He's won the Money in the Bank very dubiously. I might add on that one, but he did win it. So like in terms of the accolades, like he's always had like those top prizes and has had more than what people would say, like Hulk Hogan, The Rock, Stone Cold, and normally the names that you have. So if he's not the greatest of all time, would he feature on your Mount Rushmore of wrestlers?
It depends how big this is the thing. It depends how big that Mount Rushmore is. If
You
I've only got four faces, probably not. But here's the thing with Brock Lesnar that might articulate how I feel about him a little bit more. I've never felt like Brock Lesnar is the big star. He certainly is our big star, but I've never felt like he's the top attraction. I've always felt like he's the guy the top attraction needs to beat. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
he's the star maker rather than the star.
Yeah, he's the final boss. He's not the one you're playing as. He's not the hero fighting the final boss. He is Shao Kahn. He is Bowser. He's not Mario.
He's not been the protagonist. He's always been the antagonist, and in that sense, like you can't, to some extent, ever really root for them because they're not. They're the kind of person, the obstacle or the beast or the monster that they have to overcome to get that kind of victory. And because he's never been on the flip side of it, it's very difficult to kind of almost relate to, I guess.
But it's not a criticism because that suits him. He's suited to the role of Grendel, but we need a Beowulf to slay Grendel. You know, like that is who he is. It's like or the dragon at the end of that story. So he's the dragon in the cave that Beowulf needs to go down there and take down. He is that final boss. Like he's not Liu Kang, he's Shao Kahn. It's like I said, he's Bowser. He's not Mario. And I think for me, like where the Undertaker at times was Mario, was Liu Kang, was Beowulf. I think with Brock, like there's plenty of times where he could have been that, but it's never really made sense to, because Brock has this certain way about him, this terrifying, like look at that image right there in front of us, like he's terrifying, and that role suits him more. He doesn't need to be the Mario, the Liu Kang, the Beowulf, because the role, like no one's ever going to be a better Grendel than him, or a better Bowser, or you know, no one's ever going to do that role quite as well as he does. So you could argue, if I'm putting it on a Mount Rushmore of final bosses, yeah, he's totally on it. But I can't put him on the Mount Rushmore with Stone Cold, Undertaker, Hulk Hogan, and the Rock. But he's up here on his own. He's up here on Skull Mountain with Skeletor and Beastman and everybody else. So that's my takeaway. And I don't want anybody to think I'm taking anything away from him, because I promise you I'm not. I'm just calling it like I see it and I feel it. But if I'm allowed a Mount Rushmore with like a dozen heads on it, then yeah, he's in it, definitely.
So we've gone from not the top one, possibly not the top four, in your opinion, and maybe in the top dozen. So yeah, would he ever make a top 10 list? And
yeah,
like, I mean that as like a sort of just generic, like these are the top 10 people that have ever done it in wrestling. Brock Lesnar featured on there for you, right?
Yeah, I think he has to. I think if I was making a top, because you got to remember, I'm not thinking of who are my favorites. I'm thinking or who are the best in the ring.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be as objective as I can be in terms of like the greatest of all time, and I hate that term GOAT, because one person's GOAT is another person's GOAT, and one person's the GOAT at one thing, but they're not the GOAT at something else. So, in terms of the full wrestling package, there's only a few men who come to mind, and Brock isn't in that. But in terms of what he does, what brings you to the dance to see Brock, I think he might be the greatest of all time, the GOAT at that. I think Roman Reigns is giving him a bit of a run for his money, because Brock was Roman Reigns before Roman Reigns was Roman Reigns. You know what I'm saying there? Like Roman Reigns has everything Roman Reigns is currently doing. He kind of Brock did before, and hilariously and ironically, Roman was the one trying to topple Brock for so long, only to become him. So, yeah, I think Brock is the best in that role.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well. I would say, you know, and what I find amazing is you could actually, in my opinion, you could take Brock Lesnar and you could move him into any era of wrestling and he would still be as successful as he's been, purely because of his look, his attitude, the way he kind of moves and like who he is. You could have put him in the golden era against an Andre the Giant, against the Hulk Hogan. We've seen him against Hulk Hogan in Hogan's latter years as well. You could then move all the way through. He would have been fine in the Attitude Era. He was probably a staple of the Ruthless Aggression Era. And you could pick him up and transport him into 10 years' time, and he would still be as good as he is now, in the sense of like he'd be an absolute menace. He'd be a final boss. He'd be a beast, because that's just how good he is at what he does. But I think maybe when we're talking about wrestling in wrestlers, in the sense of how good they are and where do they stack up, probably the better question that we should be asking is, if you were creating your ultimate WrestleMania, your ultimate wrestling event, would Brock Lesnar feature somewhere on your wrestling card? And for me, categorically, yes, he would, and quite prominently as well. Yeah. So that going forward might be the better one, and maybe we'll even do a stream about what our all-time like kind of fantasy booking, you know, from
let's do
things like that would be. It would be a really interesting conversation to have, is exactly who fits on and where. But absolutely, for me, Brock Lesnar would feature on a fantasy card for, you know, the best wrestling show of all time. So yeah, inspiration strikes. We will do that at some point in the future, and I'm sure we've got some friends who would love to be involved in that kind of conversation as well. But I think that's good. We're coming up to an hour, and we've answered that question. So love to hear what you think as well. Let us know in the comments. I always read the comments if you leave any after the fact, or if you're watching this in the future. Let us know, where does Brock Lesnar fit for you in terms of the greatest wrestlers of all time? You know, does he fit in the top 1, the top 4, the top 10? Where does he kind of slot into that? If you were creating that kind of list, would be fascinated to know what you think. What's your favorite Brock Lesnar moment? All that kind of stuff. So put it in the comments, and I'll promise I'll get back to you as well. Or come and join us and let us know on stream. I'd love to have a discussion with people when they're on. But before we go, I just want to say a massive thank you to Sam again for joining me on a Friday night. It's always lovely to kind of have these feature discussions. I've started calling them Friday night features because I quite enjoy getting into that side of things. But before we go, Sam, what would you like to plug?
I'm going to give you, I'll do my regular plugs. But I'll give you one more final character comparison I've thought of as well for Brock.
Yep.
So I don't think he's never going to be Spider-Man. I also don't ever think he's going to be the Green Goblin, because the Green Goblin is Vince McMahon in this situation. But he's totally Venom, who stands in a class of his own. You know, the anti-hero, the guy who can do everything Spider-Man can do, but is bigger, stronger, faster, scarier. But Spider-Man ultimately needs to overcome Venom as well. And Venom needs to see the light and realize when he needs to throw in his lot with Spider-Man and not the villains like the Green Goblin. So there you go. Right. I know, I've got so many of them. We've done Beowulf and everything tonight. We've been Edward the Confessor. We've had everybody out. Right. Let's plug in. So come and join the Give Me a Hull Yeah podcast. We stream every week. Tonight I'll be streaming SmackDown in about 2.5 hours. So I'm going to get me a Red Bull and get ready to tackle that. And I've got a lot to say tonight. You saw me touch on it before with the whole Uso thing. I'm not going to completely slag it off or anything like that, but I do have some questions to ask. And I'm curious to see what the audience think. And we've been getting some awesome numbers on SmackDown in recent weeks. So let's keep that going. So come join us. And also support WrestleSphere. We've got some wicked interviews coming up from that. I'll be interviewing Impact Wrestling star Moose next week when I'm back from the Lake District. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I know he could be a character on Zoom interviews as well. So I'm looking forward to see how merciless he is with me, because he has been before. So it's going to be good. So stay tuned to WrestleSphere, which is our interview platform and wrestling journalism platform. We're not a dirt sheet. We just report facts and interview the wrestlers. So everything we have comes from the horse's mouth. Andy, again, you've written some features for us and done some interviews, so you'll know that well. And finally, Give Me a Hull Yeah, which is where we get to have a little bit of fun, and it's all about having a community. That, as opposed to, it's not about journalism, it's about chatting with other wrestling fans. So wicked, see you there.
Absolutely. So go find them on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook, all that good stuff, and definitely on YouTube. Go like and subscribe to the Give Me a Hull Yeah videos and channel, as well as WrestleSphere. And of course, while you're here, while you're watching, please give us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. I once again feel like I've been stuck on the same number for ages, and I'm trying to push that number of subscribers up. So click that subscribe button, and you can join us next Friday and every Friday, or any of the videos that we put up. The channel's good. It's got some great interviews up there from some of the WWE guys as well. And of course, as Sam said, check out WrestleSphere, and you can see some more work over there. Check out rushonrock.com. You get to see some weekly features on there too, in written form, which is a bit of a lost art these days. We don't just do videos. We like to actually put pen to paper, or at least keys to keypad, I guess. But go check out all that as well. But once again, thank you very much for spending your Friday evening, or if you're watching this in the future, thank you very much for watching the ramblings of two wrestling fans for the last hour and a little bit. But it's been a pleasure being here. He's been Sam, I've been Andy. This has been Wrestling Royalty.